Just had a big bang, so it's after the big bang, right? Comment.
You have been called a renunciate. Can you explain what that is?
A renunciate could be someone who changes direction, moves away from a certain level of programming and into a simplified version of that, or it could be a person born with a certain agenda that is free of certain programs from the beginning. So that may be the case here. And so both may be the case in this case. So it can happen both ways. Yeah, both ways. Make a choice to move away from certain programs. That's a simple form of it. Yeah. Now, in terms of the monastic level of it, which was not your question, but the monastic level of it could be something where you have to take vows, as you were talking about the last session, right? Yesterday's session, taking vows and taking initiations, and at each point renounce more, which could be a system of gradual renunciation. And of course there could be absolute renunciation, which often happens to be to an artist, and all of a sudden they just stop everything they're doing and go into isolation, which is a form of renunciation. Renouncing BS, renouncing a certain kind of lifestyle, renouncing relationships. If they're broken-hearted, if the person's broken-hearted, say, no, I'm done suffering broken-hearted romances, failed relationships. Or there could be a major catastrophic loss for a person, lose their business or their family, and then they renounce the world. They renounce all efforts to support the material system, and so there are different levels of it. So in this case, we're talking about a dramatic or radical change, of course, and for our purposes here, it's into the spiritual process itself, into the fire, and choosing that as the way beyond the world and its dependency upon opinions and peeps. So here we're talking about going straight to the heart. Renunciate is someone who's chosen the heart over all the parts.
What does a renunciate lose, and what do they gain?
Oh, I don't think a real renunciate is not about loss or gain. Real renunciate is a person that's operating from a whole different reality. So it's not about materialism. As such, it's moving away from loss and gain mentality completely, which is where the light is. So it's someone who recognizes the limitations and programs of losses and gains as a mechanical approach to existence, being focused on materialism, right, in terms of what relative value is limited and defined by that. So it sees everything from that perspective. And so for a renunciate is to get beyond the relative loss and gain approach to a materialistic programming. So you're just into the fire. And that's it, then you lose everything, right? And then you gain everything. So heart and nothing. Give me liberty or give me death and give me heart. And you can keep the rest.
Can you comment on renunciation relative to identification?
Well, then that's something that could be part of the renunciation. With, let us use a specific example of catastrophes, because that seems to be important. So making the best out of the worst. Catastrophes that are part of the unfoldment process, the bang over the head approach. Right? And so this is good. We have to see that as being part of the way the so-called guru works. The guru is the higher intelligence teaching a person something about their programming and the meaninglessness of life, if it's done from a certain viewpoint, that is, if it's practiced from a certain viewpoint. And then the meaningfulness of life after a disaster, where you start to recognize what changes and what loss is, where your ego, loss of ego means opening of the heart. So humiliation then can be somewhat of an awakening process. And so in this case, yeah, you want to give up as much of your river of blood materialism so that you start to get deeper and start to access something beyond that, which is truer, more spiritual or more pure in terms of what's real. So we get away from relative materialistic values to a much more absolute sense of the certainty of being, right? Spirit itself.
Can one remain in bondage to what they renounce?
Well, then you haven't renounced it. If you let it go, you let it go. And it's kind of like poo in the toilet. You know, once you let it go, that's it. You flush it, it's gone. Now there'll be those peeps, you know, who knows? Maybe some here that because it was their poop, they're going to sit by the toilet and, you know, give it an extended farewell and say, man, that was quite a poop, you know. I can't get over how great that poop was, and the food that I ate to get to that poop, man, was superb poop, right? We have to let it all go. It's all poop, see? It's all poop. It's all poop. Why? Because distraction, which is what the poop is going to prevent you from being open to what is real now. And without openness to what is real now, then you can't really know what's happening. So you're working from the past, and that's what you want to get away from. That's what you have. So it was a gain. You gain knowledge of the past, you gain memory, but you lose potential.
Is renunciation integral to spiritual practice?
Of course it is, just like the poop thing. You have to give up. Sacrifice is the process, but what we're really talking about is the trade-off mechanism of the universe. Right? It's balancing. It's a trade-off. Everything's a trade-off. Every moment is a trade-off, in a manner of speaking. Every change is a trade-off. And so this is part of it. Getting beyond losses and gains when you have a spiritual idea of what it is. We're talking about the heart consciousness, then that should outshine, or master consciousness, outshine everything else. See? That's what practice is about. You don't sit down and practice and think about materialism, right? So the losses and gains, and you sit down just to figure out your financial, economic stuff, and how much yourself can gain, and how bigger your bank account can be, and all the rest of that. That's not what sitting is for. That's what shitting is about. That's not what sitting is about. You sit to be in the moment beyond yourself and your mechanisms and your programs. See? So you enter a free space, a space of no concern, no problems, no machinations, no programs. Then from there, if we're talking about the primordial matrix, right, then there's refreshment. Otherwise it's just continuing the existence of your self-mind, your egoic programs and your materialism.
How does this relate to the idea that less is more?
Less suffering is more happiness. Less ignorance is more enlightenment. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lesson some people here have to learn. Less is better. Less BS is much better. Yeah. Less darkness is much better.
And does this apply to the idea of, let's say, so-called simple pleasures, simplicity?
Yes. What do you mean more specifically? What's a simple pleasure? Eating candy? Ice cream?
Well,
Sleeping in? Eating big meals? Right? Drinking? Right? Going out and partying? Right? Socializing? All of this? Well, if that's all you have, then that's what you do. See? Now you flip the switch to a genius, and they are possessed by what they have to do. That's it. Right? They're not hanging out that much. They may or may not, but they are possessed of an idea, and that idea uses them. See? So if we're talking about spirituality, and we're talking about the possibility of being possessed or obsessed with an idea that transcends the material self as such. See? And you work towards that. In this case, it's talking about a radical transformation by fire, purification, where what the result is a more capable being, selfless heart being, master being, potentially. And then we're talking about the realization of that, because everybody is that thought, but not everybody brings together all the conditions that manifest that in terms of a beingness and a living version of that. That's what we're trying to accomplish. See? It's the enlightened realization that transcends suffering, not as a theory, not as a momentary insight, but as a way of life. So that's what the path is for, is coming to the result of selfless, sufferingless, heartful realization. That's it, that is reality, that is true nature. Beyond all concerns about the material, and of course you have intelligence, so that you can deal with the material as it arises, and that is a big deal, not as something that is more important to the self than spirit and life itself. That's the reality right there. It's whether or not your heart is functioning, and at what level, more so than your economics, which will blind you. Right? Your materialism will blind you from your heart functioning. Beyond a point, you'll be blinded. See? So you want to take care of that in the perspective that sitting means transcending materialism. See? And thus refreshing your psychic and creative resources, so that you can then take care of your business, whether that includes the functions of materialism or not. And materialism, the psychic plane, the physical plane, psychic plane, and the subsequent planes, causal plane up to the mental plane, and whatever level of functioning your particular karma permits you to have, or your practice determines that you must have.
Is renunciation always a conscious process, or do things, let's say, simply just drop off on the path?
Well, once a certain kind of initiation has occurred, and it's not necessarily by formal initiation, it could be by experience or association or contact. It can happen by any kind of impression. Okay, it could be a sound, could be a form of music, could be a book, of course, could be contact with a person. Then, depending on what the nature of that relationship is and what the resonance is, then things can automatically start to fall away. And as I was saying earlier on the tape that was a disaster, right? The Big Bang tape, some things have to happen spontaneously. It's just the nature of the reality. It's got to happen by itself. So the idea is to be set up in such a way karmically, or aligned to something, where this happening by itself can be the case. More the case than not. Yes. So can you awaken in the company of a certain kind of teacher under strange and mysterious circumstances? Of course. Is that likely? Not likely, but is it possible? Absolutely. It can happen anytime. Be careful with the next time you go sit on the can. You never know. Right? You might not survive that. Right? You might be going down the toilet. Yourself might be put through the tubes.
So would the effect of, let's say, simply outgrowing something for whatever reason equate to renouncing whatever that is?
Second?
Let's say, you outgrow a certain way of behaving. Is that the equivalent of...
No, renunciation is a much more deliberate process than that. Okay, now, in some cases where the person, we're going to speculate here, in the case of certain peeps, they're operating in what would appear to be a normal function, right? Successful, maybe not as materially successful, but successful enough. Could be a panhandler, a happy panhandler, let's say. Happy hobo. Nothing wrong with that. Their master's in that form too, why not? Okay. So, then all of a sudden, you're yanked out of that into something completely different, but you don't have any basis for it. So something can happen from another lifetime, as we were talking about earlier, which is not what we have now, is a different dimension. See? When we're talking about time, we're talking about multi-dimensional possibilities. And that's one of the gifts of the process. That's what pressure creates. That's one of the mysteries of the process. Because you have a lot of people in asylums and going for therapy that are going for therapy to slow their evolution, their progression down, where they're starting to undergo certain changes that they're not intellectually or egoically prepared to handle, but a part of their spiritual breakdown, but they're afraid of it, so they go and they get medicated to slow the process down and deny it and or repress it and push it into non-existence.
Can one attempt from an egoic point of view to renounce and enter into kind of a...
Well, let's put it this way. You can renounce as an ego, but that doesn't mean any changes are going to come with it. I renounce this, I renounce that, I renounce that. Doesn't mean anything's going to happen. So that is wishful thinking. So Just like saying, oh, I want to have and I will have $1 million, I'll have this kind, I desire, all of this. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. The same with piety. Doesn't mean God is going to show up in any particular form. So, because you're the most perfect practitioner. Doesn't mean that. So here we're talking about a Zen quality, right? Crazy intervention that can happen. And that's what this practice is open to, because that's the nature of this music. It's kind of like freak music, freak, accident music, right? Spontaneous birth music, see? Pure creation and recreation. Birthing process, you have to be prepared for that. See? And then you grow from there. It's not like an idea, it's not a concept, because once this happens, your change of direction occurs, but it doesn't mean you stop your practice. It means that a new level opens up for you, and then you continue to progress in that level. It can happen within whatever you're doing, but then you're operating on another level, which is basically the same thing, but nobody notices the change, but you notice it. It's a real change, it's subjective. But it's there, it's part of it. And this is pressure that's created from some kind of original, let us say, renunciation. Say, no, I'm more than the body. I'm more than my culturing, I'm more than my parentage. I'm more than my race. Right? I'm more than human. As soon as you say that, you may have renounced your destiny as a human. In some cases, it's that possible. So that might be the key word, the code word for your shifting into another reality. So that's why it's important to say, yes, I am free, I need to be free. And you want to take whatever comes with that. But it might be 2 lifetimes away. But at least you can say, yes, I'm here to be free, I want to be free. And so that in 2 lifetimes away, maybe in a couple of generations, someone will say, someone in your line said they wanted to be free, and here you popped out 2, 3 generations later with this impulse that they couldn't realize, but they put it out there. And it doesn't have to come through your genealogy, it's just psychic. See? And then somebody can have a dream of hearing somebody, that's you, saying, hey, I need freedom, I am free, I will be free, and boom, they got it. And you're trying to tell yourself that. That means your river of blood to conform to, or come into alignment with all the karma that would enable you to realize that completely for yourself, beyond yourself. See, so to be able to put this into practice, as I mentioned earlier, relative to the being a space being, or everybody being a space being in time machines, which is really, really a profound concept. The time machine means the Cal matrix, right? And that's the universe, complete universe, right? The infinite universe of time, right? That means the control of all matter. So the matrix, the time matrix, that's what it is. Cosmic machine. It determines everything in terms of karma, conditions, created, being created now, in creation, and then to be created, because it's all part of a continuum, right? It says orbital. So when we see a planet orbiting around the sun, well, the universe is orbiting around other things. Why would it be different? The universe is like a planet. We're inside the planet universe, orbiting around its own source. But we don't see that, because our minds are so small, we've been waiting for an intellectual to tell us what it is. So we don't have the freedom to know. Right? Because you think intellectual knowledge is superior to truth. Factual knowledge, material knowledge is superior to the truth. That's a lie. It's a lie. The truth has been there from the beginning in the consciousness of those who want to know that, who need to know that, so that they can be that and live from that. See? And so that their intuition, because of their sacrifice, their renunciation, saying, I don't want anything else than have the true. I want to just be true. I don't want anything else as a distraction or some kind of diversion. I want just that. And some people enter this life with this kind of dedication and devotion. this focus, this clear-minded, single-point view of things. So this is it, only. Boom. And then it's like saying, well, dear Lord, dear God, dear Master, I'm not going to budge from my dedication until this bears fruit. Till I see a sign to move somewhere else. So fine, that could be dogmatic, that could be stubborn, but that could be right on, depending on the person. So, it could be right on, because they may have evolved to a point in thousands and thousands of lifetimes so that they can actually come to the still point. They come to actual stillness, which is a miracle. In the time-space world, that's a miracle. As you can come to absolute stillness and feel the radiance of peace. There's no thought, no self, no mind, no disturbances. That's miraculous. It's like the yin-yang coming together, that's the Tao. So to be in tune with and as the Tao, that's miraculous. It's not normal. But yet it's totally natural.
Is renunciation a result, inevitable or otherwise, of seeing things clearly, let's say?
Well, death is going to force you into renunciation. You got to renounce it all at death. When death knocks at the door, it's over. You don't want to be a renunciant, but he says, guess what? You are one. And you're going to find out you're the best one that you've ever known, because you got to give it all up here, now, on the spot. Layer by layer, it's going, boom, gone. Then the mother renounced you. Your mother's body rejected you. Renounced and said, I don't want you in my body. You don't belong to me. There you go. Get out of here. Get out there. Get a life. Get over it. You were born. Renunciation, to be born. To be renounced, rejected, abandoned, thrown out, right? Left alone. Supported, yeah, but you're on your own. So you are your own being. So it starts right there. Or if you go deeper, then it starts at the conception. Then you have a particularization where then boom, something's been frozen. It's a conception, crystallization, boom. Right, the groundwork for the being. Right, chemical basis for the being. So it's already limited. So, but something had to be renounced in order for that to come into being. So, renunciation is the creation and destruction point at the same time. That's like saying renunciation is disagreement with something. Total, absolute disagreement. Say, no, can't do that, won't do that, won't be that. Boom, come what may. Take my life or whatever. So in some cases, I'd rather be dead than bound to this or have to do that. Say, no, I'll start over again. Boom, so be it. So renunciation is this very, very serious renunciation. It means no turning back. So that's done. Boom. That's what renunciation is. It's not mediocre, it's not negotiation. So, well, I'd renounce, but then, now that I met you, I'll rethink it. Because, I haven't met anybody look as good as you do. So here I was a renunciate a half hour ago, but now I'm rethinking that because, man, you gave me pause for thought. Now I see how foolish it was for me to even think of renunciation, because here you are. Just what I've been praying for. Right? That's not renunciation. Right? In no way, shape, or form. That's Joe Blow. Right? Yeah. No, renunciation is clear. Right? Beyond negotiation. It's like waking up into a new world, saying, no, I need to do this. It's mission focus. Ultimate purpose. Clear as a bell, but it's not to be seen as some kind of stubborn negative. It's clear, path, light, purpose, genius. Fire. So that's where the masters are, in fact. Master.
So renunciation is both beginning and end. So renunciation is also, let's say, affirmation of something other than what...
Well, affirmation is indirect. It's not really an affirmation. You don't have to say anything. It's just knowing that you are beyond a certain limited condition. Like some people have to renounce their religion because it's just inadequate for them. It's no longer serving its purpose. They know I renounce this because it betrays my sense of reality. Problem. People renounce their relatives because of some condition. And they know they can't go back. They cannot agree or support something. Renounce. People renounce their children because they commit crimes. Say, no, that's no good. Can't have that. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but renunciation takes different forms. It's an absolute decision, but it doesn't have to be. But here, when we're talking about renunciation in terms of the spiritual process, you just know you got to go where you got to go. And you have to let everything go. And certainly in the case of these esoteric schools, you can learn to let go systematically by grade school, one grade after another, letting go a little bit more, and depending on what you're gaining. So it can be materialism in terms of loss and gain. What am I going to get from it? Do I get this? I get this kind of bone? Will you give me 2 bones if I do this? Can I have a bag of bones? Can I have a whole coffin full of bones? Or can I have the cemetery? Hey, this guy gets the cemetery. He gets all the bones. In fact, he's all bones.
Can you talk about the practice of austerities in relationship to renunciation?
Austerities. Well, with renunciation, we can call it austerities, but they're the candies. Candies. They're the sweetmeats. So deprivation is sweetmeat. There's no deprivation, right? If you are in tune with the renunciation and you're traveling the path of self-sacrificing, purificational transformation, then whatever you have to give up to get there is what you give up happily. So, you need an arm? Take it. I don't want an arm. I want the big kahuna, right? Give me those big kahunas, right? I want the golden coconuts, right? With the cherry juice inside. Give me that. I won't settle for anything less, right? Or as it is in the traditions, God, right? They want the sublime, the ultimate nectar, ambrosia, amrit, that's what it's called. The divine elixir. And you have it when you're there. You know what it is because you're in this kind of bliss, right? This trans orgasm, state of trans orgasm, right? And that's freedom, liberation, bliss, and then the bliss melts into clearness. It's neutral, and it's a different form of bliss. It's almost like without a certain kind of quality, right? It's like a quiet but radiant silence, right?
So can one will oneself into, whatever their goal is through renunciation, whether they have the proper understanding or recognition of what they're trying to do?
Well, what you're talking about is some kind of self-induced renunciation, and then what I'm talking about is catastrophic renunciation, where you have no choice because you're going to jump off the roof. It's the only way you're going to save yourself. You jump off the roof. So you have a tree you can jump into, or there's water down there. You try for the tree to jump over the tree so you get to the water. Of course you have to know how to swim. So assuming you can swim, or if you're lucky you just break a branch, and that's what you use, it carries you where you need to go. And say, I'm going to pick that branch down, I'm going to jump off the roof, hit that branch, take it down with me, and I'm going to keep going. Could be. Yeah? So there's a certain kind of urgency, right? But there's more of a don't turn back, I can't turn back quality to it. Yeah? And then it's real renunciation. Yeah? It's not flipping on it. A master is a master, let's say, who has renounced their own BS and self-interest, egotism that prevents the kind of release and the leaping, that you need to make the leap, you need to jump out of yourself, right? Fearlessly, you have to jump. Even if you're afraid, you have to jump anyway. It's no choice. You got to jump out. And then you say, no, I don't know, but I know. So myself doesn't know, but I know I have to do this because nothing else is working. Okay? Nothing else is working. I want to be with the masters. And this is the process. I'm at the jumping point right now. Okay? And I don't want to hold back. It's no holding back on the leap. Just a right. It's radical. It's not comfortable for materialists. Say, well, what's the security there? What can I do? What can I take with it? How do I know I'm going to survive it? What am I going to gain from that? Right?
So the basis is not necessarily fearlessness. One can, with all their fears, move forward.
Well, fear actually can motivate you. Remember, fear can translate into courage. So it can. It's possible. You're so afraid you forget yourself. And you say, hey, I don't want to die here. Let me get that gun or whatever, and I'm going to shoot my way out. Before you know it, you're the hero. But you were, right, scared to death. Right? Like, what's that guy named Knox? Right? Tom Knox, what's his name? That nervous cat?
Don Knotts?
Don Knox?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don Knox? Yeah. That character. Right?
Bernie Fife. Yeah.
Right, totally inept, it would seem. We're all that. Right.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, can one attempts to renunciate, let's say, imitation or something, come from an egoic source and ultimately be counterproductive?
Oh, anything is possible as far as karma is concerned. Right? Every individual case is unique. So to come up with a formula in all cases doesn't really work or apply adequately to what could happen for some peeps. See, because we forget there are psychic processes. There are spirits involved. I mean, materialists and scientists don't want to talk about, right? They like the idea of energies they haven't labeled and discovered. They know there's all kinds of weird stuff out there. They're watching all these alien objects flying around in space that everybody who has any eyeballs can see, right? But they're acting like, well, they're not UFOs, they're not aliens, they're just, well, they got to be some kind of phenomenon, maybe related to solar spots, and these things are dancing around and flashing and doing everything but talking to, hi guys, hello, hello, we're out here, right? Because if you're here, we could be out here too. It's a big space. And we don't need your permission and certification to be out here. This is really the way it works, right? Who's waiting for anybody to certify anything, right? But this is after the fact. Okay? This is after the bang. The bang is the end. This is the beginning, but I want this tape to stay working this time. All right? This is the end, right? When we're going beyond the end, because the end is only, the beginning. All right? It's part of the beginning. No end, no beginning. Huh? So the Big Bang is the big beginning, right? The big end and the big beginning at the same time. So getting back to our point, in terms of renunciation, is this intuition that the end is imminent, it's here, and now you want the beginning because you know the beginning is part of it because you are living. And this whole idea of rebirth is built into us because that's how we manifest. Through a process of birth and rebirth and rebirth and rebirth. You were saying earlier, what about reincarnation in time? Well, you can call it that, but this is the rebirth process. This is the survival impulse ad infinitum. Right? Like the earth will survive until it self-destructs or something else bangs it out into non-existence or dissolves it. See? But it will survive as long as it can. It's just the way it is. It's natural. You know that because you know how you feel about your life force. You want to survive as long as you can. Not that, you may survive in the same way as much as your ideal is, but you'll survive as long as you can. This is true of everybody. Not that they know in all cases when they're going to go or how they're going to go, but as I stated in the last tape, you can know if you're open enough. You can know what your time is, and this is about time. And so time relative to renunciation is crucial. They are interrelated. Because it's time to go beyond yourself. See? And if it's not the right time, then it's not real renunciation. It can't be negotiated. It's like you know what it is. It's like you start climbing up the mountain and then you go beyond a half point into the danger zone. And then you're going for the top and you say, no, I have to. There's no, it's a madness. Yeah, so this is part of a madness. Yes, it's a form of psychosis, let's say, by psychologic standards. Right? Because you're going into the unknown, you're embracing your unconscious. Say, no, I want to know. I want to know and I want to go beyond all my programs because I want to be free of all of this.
So I and most beings want to live as long as they can, but there are, let's say, choice points where I might choose something over life. So
over life? What could that be over life? What does over life mean? Life is
instead of
everything.
Life, instead of life, like do this or die. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. So kill me.
Oh, you mean rather die?
Yeah.
Well, that's because you have an intuition about a better life. Say in this case, people want to do that. Not because they feel they're going to not exist, but they do it because they know they will be better off elsewhere. See? Which then is true to the primordial principle that energy cannot be destroyed, but it can move. It can transform, but not be destroyed completely. Okay? It can't be extinguished as such. It just moves. Changes.
That would apply to the conventional wisdom that nature abhors a vacuum. Does renunciation create a vacuum?
Well, a vacuum is a concept, just like a non-vacuum is a concept. So these concepts, if they're going to educate people, can be useful. Okay, so the space could be considered vacuum, right? Ignorance and enlightenment could be considered vacuums in themselves. Say realities in themselves, empty. Say empty of what? Phenomena maybe, or self, empty of what? Static, empty of noise, empty of right. This is what I would say. Possibilities. Because we are part of the dark force as well as the light. And then we are also equally part of the clear that can comprehend all of this in terms of recognizing it as being what one is. Right? What one is. Not who one is, but what one is as awareness. So then we go to, if you want to find out knowledge, then you consider the awareness of things, and you determine your knowledge according to that. If you want to find out beyond knowledge, right, what that is, beyond knowledge, and knowing beyond knowing, then it's the awareness of awareness, which then determines a state of being. See, beyond knowledge, even beyond knowing, so you're just being.
Does renunciation
So
equate?
here, at this point, then it's a renunciation of not knowing and ignorance. So I need to know, because I know I don't know. So I want to renounce that. I want to renounce my tendency and programming towards being content with ignorance. So then you go into a certain kind of program, right, for transcension. Some program of training to help you go deeper so that you can at least make an effort to go deeper than the programs you are suffering. To cause this kind of consideration to come up. Say, no, I have to go beyond this. Right? My karma is just too unbearable right now. It's too restrictive. It's too inhibitive. It's too uncreative. Such. You need to make changes. And this is for your survival. It's not about making changes to look good. It's talking about real changes for your survival. It's kind of like being underwater, man. You need air. You're going to struggle to get up there somehow or other. You're going to fight for it because you're dying. You don't want to have to die. You want your air. So that kind of struggle and desperation is like renunciation of the high order. Say, no, this is done. Now I want to become enlightened. I want that. Or awakened. Or creative. Say, spiritually, potentially, full of wisdom and awareness and grace.
So would renunciation equate to denunciation?
Possibly. But renunciation is specific in that it's a very, very clear decision to move away from delusion and ignorance. So you can say, well, I denounce this and I denounce that. And renunciation is comparable to that in a certain sense. Again, it's more absolute in this case for the people who are really spiritually determined to become more aware of who they are being. Then this is serious. Right? So then it's like taking on robes, right, and moving beyond the world completely, which is the case. Or not even the world, that's just one form of it. You can be, you can renounce what you've done as an artist. Say, hey, I don't do that anymore. I want to go beyond that. So you have a change of direction, and you completely refuse to go back and do that. Just, you know, stuff I've heard from artists. So no, I'm not going to play that tune anymore. End of story. It's done. Can't do that. What it means, it's useless now. Can't go back to it. Or that school of thought. Can't play that anymore. End of story. See? Renounced it. See, gone beyond it. So we have to use the word renounce and gone beyond in a, you know, reasonable way.
So can one follow, let's say, a course or program of renunciation offered from outside, or is it simply a spontaneous recognition and
as I said at the beginning, you can do it by the grade school system, or it can possess you. And then that's it, then it will have its way. It's like like an urge or desire. It's a creative urge. And so it will have its way. You see that you have no choice but to do it. And that's the beauty of it, although it might sound obsessive. But this is important, it's that important, like leaving a country or getting away from something that's really unhealthy or causing a lot of pain in the person. Say, these psychic disturbances that people get. See, to move away from something or someone, this is all part of, not so much renunciation as a conscious process, but trying to move based upon what you feel. Okay? So you can have psychic disturbances that are not anything like renunciation, but you know you clearly have to move. So this is a lesser level, infinitely lesser level of the kind of urgency that comes with real renunciation. Right? Because then when your heart is opening, you say, well, all beings are waiting for me to come to full realization. Now, very few people have that kind of impression. So I'm doing this for all beings. I don't have time. I've already wasted thousands of lifetimes, let's say, depending on what school of thought you're coming from. So wasting myself. Now I want to make a difference. So now's the time. So the difference is already made. Made my choice. I'm going to be a practitioner of peace.
Can one practice renunciation out of some confusion and end up in a worse condition?
Well, then we have to question whether or not it's renunciation or if it's confusion to begin with. So it's not renunciation. So there may not be any great plan. There's no master plan. So, because you see, when, let's say, people see monks, they're not that sure they're renunciates, but then when they see the monks and they connect, then they say, yes, this is what I am, this is what I want to do, I got to do this now. And even though they may return to the world later on, they know at that moment that regardless of what happens, they need to be a monk, let us say. Or, in the case of an artist, they need to go through a certain kind of change, purificational change. They can't do that anymore. Maybe they change an influence. Say, no, it's not that I'm progressing, but I'm moving from one point to the next point because I feel it's necessary for what I feel I have to do. So everything else has to be renounced. See? All the developmental things have to be renounced completely, taken off the map. It's like forgetting that you ever went to school. Forgetting that you had any influences whatsoever. And then you have to come up with something.
Can you talk about the use of rituals to go through the renunciation process?
Rituals, in what sense? It's a decision that's made, and then you change, and you go through it. Right? So now everybody has their own requirement in terms of a progression. And so it depends on whether or not you're talking about a person that's chosen spiritual practice, whatever, but this is an internal mechanism of no turning back. That quality of renunciation, right? No holding back, no turning back. Forward motion only. So everything that you do is part of that. It's not about having any rituals. It's an internal switch. It's done. So everything you do then is what it is. Because you're moving in that direction. It's like you're on the ship going in that direction, and that's it. Like it or not, it's moving in that direction. You're going to get, that ship's going to stop, and you're going to get off there. And you're going to have to make the most of it and say, whoa. So yeah, so it's like that. It must go. Moth to the flame. Renunciation. Of course there are people who are not as extreme as this, not as passionate as this. So I say, well, again, going back to the relative reasonable, renunciation is a change of mind until something else comes up that's better. Materialism, that's not renunciation. Renunciation is hatchet to the wood. Boom. Anything that gets in the way gets chopped.
I'm asking from my point of view of having had experiences of seeing things about my condition that I wanted to permanently get rid of, and sort of used a ritual spontaneously created to denote this is the time, this is the place, this is the change.
Well, you see, that's a slow boat to Burma approach to it, because then maybe not. Like you're negotiating it, it's your trip, it's personal. When you are devoted to something higher and greater than yourself and your mechanisms, they will fall away by starvation. Again, there's a higher approach to it where you put your mind on a higher principle or a higher being, and you work from there. And by translation, transference, right? You can make your gains. If you want to call them gains, you have this movement, this transformation, but not something that you negotiate. You're in control of, which means there's no renunciation really. There's this strategy towards renunciation, but not real renunciation. Strategy, strategizing, and so on, which is not bad. It's just a slow approach to it. Because then once you're focused on what we are talking about, let's say on the fire, your whole being, if you're focused, then your whole being's going to know what's going on. And there are going to be a lot of parts of your whole being that are going to say, I ain't going. I'm gone. I'm out of here. And so those things will fall away. Why? Because you are totally focused on the burn. And that's it. So that your consciousness and the burn are the same thing. Right? So you're telling all your influences to burn. And enjoy the burn. See how many stick around. Right? So it's like going to a club and you pull out this torch. Right? Say, this is what I'm kissing now. Would you like to try it? Would you kiss this flame? Right? See my lips, they're all roasted. This is what I do now. Would you like to try it? I don't think so. It's that bizarre. So what? This guy's into the flame. Well, the only way to attain realization as a flame is to become the flame.
Should one identify with being a renunciate or renunciate such identification?
This brings up a point, not to answer your question. But in renunciation, this is what it is. Let's say a person sees the Jesus symbol. They say, I want to be that. That's how I need to be. And then that's their focus. It's like you can't change that. Everything else is renounced. I can't be anything less than that. Boom. Or in the case of the Dalai Lama and peeps like that, there are many peeps that say, see that? There it is. That's what I need to become like. Boom, simply. Or if it's an art form, then you go to preferred master of the art form, say, I need to be like that. And I'm going to work towards that. And that's your focus. And that's it. Nothing else matters. No girlfriends, no peeps. Everything gets taken care of, but that's the focus. That's where your heart is. Otherwise, you can't say you're going towards that. So you say you like it, you think about it now and then, so mediocrity is not going to get you to your goal. Materialism won't get you to a goal that extreme. Only extreme focus will get you to the extreme goal, so to speak. And it doesn't have to be a raving mad thing. It can be very quiet, but you know. You just have the certainty level. It's clear. Some people have an abstract, but a working idea of spirit being part of the process for themselves. And so in a quiet way they renounce depending on themselves. So they say, well, I want spirit to take care of it. Well, you have to be in resonance with what spirit is. You have to be very clear as what that is. If it's not your conscience, if it's not your better judgment, what is the spirit? And what could the spirit be if it's not your conscious or better judgment? So then how are you going to perceive it? If it's not your conscious or your better judgment, how are you going to perceive it? Let's say it's an intuition, but it's not a gut feeling. It's not a subjective intuition. Say it's a beam of light. How do you interpret that? So, or it could be some other thing. Now, it could show up and say the spirit moves you to go to a teacher or something. And then you work from that, and you have to feel it out. You have to say, well, is this spirit related? And if it is, then you should feel very good about it. And if it isn't, then you won't. And then from there you see what you can get to see if it picks up the pace for you. Okay? Because people can only spend so much time in their own mental factory figuring out, well, I got to do this now, but I'm not sure I'm doing it right, so maybe I need a sign from Spirit. People who don't have teachers, who are reading books, and are more or less in the bookstore approach to spirituality, right? As bookworms, need help. See? So they're reading all this abstract stuff about this kind of power, that kind of power, right? And they're reading the books on how to get this power, how to have that power. And so they're experimenting in terms of seeing where they fit into all this power, because power is a trap. And then you see that the spiritual path itself is a renunciation of power, personal power. It's nothing to do with personal ego building, excuse me, Arnold, muscle building, power. It's not about that exactly. It's not about looking at your muscles necessarily. That's one kind of power. Not that that's bad, it's just a program. This is about heart power, which is not as tangible. It's not like you can manipulate it and use it against people, like your ego would like to do. It's like, look at my thing. Look at my thing, more powerful. My biceps are huger than yours, more well-defined than yours. Look at these ripples. Have you ever seen ripples like these? These are my ripples, right? Get over it. They're my ripples. See? And so you want to get away from all of that kind of self-building worship of mediocrity and go to the extreme, which means self-transcending, where you don't have any image whatsoever. So no, it seems like you're getting into spirituality, because let's say the monks, the yogis, it seems like an image, but you get closer to them, there's no image in that, right? There's no image in it. Once the peelings of the onion skin are recognized, say, well, now they're in caves, but they're not in caves, they're in consciousness. And say, holy smoke, I thought this guy was doing nothing here. This is a burn. The smoke's coming out of his ears, his eyes. This guy is in a whole other universe. See? But then that's for those who are willing to see. See? So he's renounced not doing that for the privilege and honor to be able to do that, to work from a whole other level. And so that's what it's about. A commitment, dedication to working from another level. That may be useless to other people, even bizarre to other people, but then if you start to recognize what your limitations are as an ordinary peep, and that the best way to serve others is to get grace waves happening, then that's what you cultivate. You say, no, I have to go to this. I have to renounce mediocrity and negativity as a contribution and try to get to generating the highest level of grace waves for the sake of all peeps.
So what role does the master play in the practitioner's renunciation or recognition of renunciation?
Practitioner is already a renunciator, otherwise it wouldn't be a practitioner. Practitioner is someone who's already renounced in quiet forms and maybe dramatic fashion. They've already renounced being anything less than a practitioner. And it's not like they're proud of being a practitioner, they find that that's the only way to be. It's not about pride, it's not about status. It's just a movement into a simplicity that is uplifting. Basic, normal, natural simplicity, like a tree and like grass. Right? You get into basic breathing, you get back to nature, psychically correct nature. Where you want to slow down into stillness, not be asleep. You want to be sharp. Sharp as a razor, clear. And that's what stillness practice gives you an opportunity to be and to see. Because if you want to know what's going on and what's coming down to you, the best way to read that is from stillness. So if you're too caught up in the whirlwind and turbulence of your karmic circumstance or what's going around you in terms of societal movement and streams and what is that called? Whitewater, you know, torrential movement and so on, which are carrying peeps downstream. If you get distracted by that, your mind is there, you're not hearing what you need to hear and feel. Caught up in worldly affairs, it's the same kind of issue. Whereas you're not listening, so you're not informing your own being by appropriate listening and quietness, where you pick up the currents that way. So you're not receiving. You have to open yourself to receive what it is. And if you're filling your void, because you have a void, because you're out of touch with feeling and receiving for yourself, so you want to go to the tube or magazines or papers and books, you're losing time, right? You're losing momentum, right? Because it's not there. It's in you. It's in the leaf blowing in the wind. See? It's not reading a book, but it's vibrating according to the forces, which is the problem with the human state and its mental programming, where it's become more unnatural, less psychically evolved, thus more dependent upon the intellectual games and programs of the authorities. And so that's why governments are where they are, and that's because, you know, it's better for those who are giving up their spirituality. But if you have a spiritual side, you're not interested in that. You're beyond that. You don't care about that. It's like another universe. The trees don't care. Of course they care if they're being torn down, but for the most part they're fine with letting everybody else be. And sure, they got to choke on bad air, but you know, they're cool with that. Last question.
So is a process of renunciation a prerequisite to coming into a master's field?
You can say so. To get into the field, there has to be some clearance. Now, it could be renunciation from former lives. That's possible, right? Whereas when you enter the teacher's company, you know everything stops. You know to get there because you recognize what the teacher is as a renunciate. The whole idea of a teacher is a renunciate. You may not call the teacher that, but in terms of the spiritual peeps that we are describing, in terms of vairagis or masters of detachment from the world, who are in the service of the spiritual education of peeps, right, and self-mastery of individuals, then you know they have their own kind of flavor about what it is in terms of renunciation and you know that whole process. So it's part of it. You may be set up for it years before. You may have dreams that demonstrate to you former and earlier renunciation, and that qualifies you in a certain sense to feel okay in the company of renunciate beings, in this case masters. But they're really renunciate beings, or monks, who are devotees of freedom and pure love. Love always you.